All right, so now the war portion of the debate.
Oh, God.
This drove me crazy. We snapped right back into like 2001 to 2003, height of the war on terror, absolute hysteria, mania, panic, insanity. We're right back there.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy to see. So first, we got a little compilation here for you. Let's play some of the greatest hits of warmongering last night. Take a look.
As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas.
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them.
I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border.
If you want to stop the 40-plus attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran.
I mean, they're saying these things at a time when 9,000 Palestinian civilians were just killed in the past 3 weeks.
It's over 9,000 now. Yeah.
It's over 10,000. I know the total death toll is over 10,000. I thought it was 9,000 who were civilians. But then also 4,000 children are part of that.
Yep.
They've leveled over half of Gaza. Israel basically announced we're going to annex half of Gaza and we're going to control it for a while indefinitely. Like, as ethnic cleansing is going on, genocide is going on, just honestly a worse, more barbaric bombing campaign than we saw in Afghanistan over the course of an entire year. They've dropped more bombs in 3 weeks than we did in Afghanistan over an entire year at the height of the Afghanistan bombing.
Yeah.
All that's going on, and these guys are like, finish them, yes, get the butchers, smoke them, smoke the terrorists, do that, bomb Iran too, yes, and it's like, there is no concern for real-world consequences. I don't expect these absolute charlatans and losers to care about innocent Palestinian civilians. I would never expect them to do that. But at the very least, you should be concerned about, if you bomb Iran, that's war with Iran, you're definitely sentencing thousands of our young American men and women to go die over there. You don't even care about that? And the answer is no, they don't. They don't. And by the way, all these assholes on stage, save maybe Vivek. Vivek is just wrong on the substance. But everybody else on that stage is definitely taking campaign contributions from Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin, the entire military-industrial complex. Now, I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg thing, right? Does the ideology then lead for them to get that money and then they continue pushing that? Or is it, I'm kind of neutral on the issue and then because they pay me, I become pro-war? Doesn't matter. Either way, being pro-war is wrong.
Yeah. It was actually sickening to watch. And I'm not surprised. Nikki Haley is total unreconstructed neocon. Tim Scott, total unreconstructed neocon. Chris Christie is supposed to be some moderate, total unreconstructed neocon. But it's just shocking to see them all up there. Like, and it's not just war with Iran. They're cheering for war with Iran. Their critique of Biden is that he hasn't been aggressive enough in, like, getting us into a war in the Middle East. That's their critique of Biden. Let me put Vivek aside for a minute because I want to talk about his Israel policy specifically in a minute, which he clarified in an interview with me and Sagar, which we'll get to that in a second. But it's not just war with Iran. They're like, they want war with China over Taiwan. They want war with Mexico over the drug cartels. I mean, the number of wars. Even Ann Coulter was online like, Jesus, these people want to start a lot of wars. What a bunch of lunatics.
She's rebranded as a paleo-conservative when she used to be a neocon.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just disturbing. The level of psychopathy it takes to just float, these mass, potentially worldwide conflicts. Like, this is a good thing. Like, this is something anyone's cheering for. If you pull even the Republican base, it's not like they're responding to what the Republican base wants. If you ask them, they're very concerned, too, about
55% want a ceasefire right now in Gaza.
Well, yes, about what's happening in the Middle East and don't want it to spiral out of control and are worried about us getting pulled into it. So you have to look at the money involved and say, oh, they're just still reflexive on their, like, Cold War era and then War on Terror era military hawkishness. You combine that with the money that's at stake for saying the right, like, let's go to war things, and you end up with a horror show.
And by the way, they are all creating more Hamas members by the day.
Absolutely.
Which is ironic because they're all like, you got to finish Hamas, get rid of Hamas. Well, you killed 9,000 civilians. How many of them have kids now who lost their parents who are then going to join Hamas and they're going to dedicate their life to taking down the state of Israel?
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no... We've learned nothing. This is what drives me crazy is like we had the entire war on terror era. Don't you remember the Abu Ghraib scandal? Don't you remember the Guantanamo Bay scandal, that we were torturing all of these innocent people and the pictures came out and it was horrible and you created more terrorists as a direct result of that? And, you know, we killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians in Iraq, displaced millions of people. When you look at, when all said and done, over $7 trillion was spent in the Middle East on these wars when you account for the interest and expand out a couple decades. Like, so much money, blood, treasure, absolutely wasted for nothing. It led to the rise of Al-Qaeda and the rise of ISIS. You broke a region in the Middle East. The only people who made out like bandits were the military-industrial complex, were the contractors who went in there, and they made a tremendous amount of money. If you read the Afghanistan papers, the absolute looting of the treasury, where they would just take these billion-dollar contracts, the money's gone, and they wouldn't even do a project that they were supposed to do in Afghanistan. This is what happened. They learned nothing from any of this. Yeah. If anything, they don't care. They still support it, despite all of the waste, fraud, and abuse, and death, and genocide, and pain. They don't, it's astonishing to me. And you made this point the other day. I thought it was a great point, that what's happening now in Gaza is this generation's wake-up call, the way that, like, our generation's wake-up call was the war in Iraq. That it's like, whoa, I didn't even know something like this was on the table. I didn't know something like this was possible. You psychos are going to do what now?
And with our dollars and with our acquiescence, and we're just going to pretend like Israel isn't committing war crime after war crime in front of the world's eyes. We're going to justify and say absolutely no red lines. We're with you no matter what.
They are, and we discussed this the other day, Israel released a list of the 1,400 people who were killed. About 45% of the people Hamas killed were civilians. 45%. Would you like to take a guess what the percentage is? Palestinian civilians killed by the IDF? It's 90%. Hamas has a better percentage in terms of getting military targets versus the IDF. Yeah. Both as a raw number and a percentage. And they're cheering this on.
So as I mentioned before, Sagar and I interviewed Vivek the day after the debate, and I asked him some of these questions, and because you didn't really get a full picture of what his view on Israel is. Clearly his approach now, because he's been kind of rebuked on some of the things that he's said about aid or whatever, is just to try to be as bloodthirsty as possible for a Republican audience. And so I was trying to push him on, well, do you think they're committing war crimes? And here's some evidence of war crimes, and what do you say to that? And his whole view is, I don't think they are, but basically I don't really care.
Jesus Christ.
We would just not, he wouldn't send them any more money. He would not send them the $14 billion, and he'd just say, all right, you all do whatever you're going to do. So he has the true, like, paleo-conservative.
Yeah, the isolationist.
The isolationist, paleo-conservative view. And, you know.
That is not the leftist view.
Not at all.
Not even close.
Not at
There's
all.
a big difference.
Not at all. And it was, I mean, to me, it's just sort of stunning to be like, yeah, I mean, collective punishment, whatever. It's my opinion that they're not, but, you know, I'm not running for, he was saying, like, I'm not running for head of the UN or anything like that. So I'm not really that interested in it. I just would cut off their funding. And then to your point about so then I asked him, are you concerned about security blowback to the US? Because as you were saying, like, bombs stamped made in America are being dropped on innocent Palestinian civilians as we speak. Do you not worry about the radicalization and the potential blowback that could create? And he was like, no, I just think that jihadists are going to be jihadists, whatever we do. And I don't know if he really believes that or not, or if he's just trying to spin in the moment. But it does get to this core view of, you know, conservatives tend to think this is just like, this is how they are. It's just their culture. It's, you know, their religion, it's their culture, et cetera. And so whatever we do, it doesn't really make a difference. They were going to hate us and want to kill us anyway. That
is the reductive Sam Harris line of argument on this conflict. That, like, they're bad. Israel's good. It's their ideology. Material conditions don't matter at all. It's all about their beliefs. It's all about the Quran and a literal interpretation of it.
Right.
It is purposefully dense.
Yeah.
It's a purposefully dense way of looking at the situation.
Yeah. Like, you think an organization like Hamas just comes out of nowhere? Like, just if Gazans had been, if Palestinians in Gaza had just been able to live their lives and be able to prosper and, you know, have
if the peace deals in the 90s went through, if the peace deals in the 90s actually I went through and we implemented it, obviously there would be way, way fewer extremists. Probably on both sides, to be honest.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I got to show you one more. This is still about war.
Okay.
You're not going to believe what Tim Scott said. Take a look at this.
The long-term threat is China. Immediate threat is our southern border. In order for us to have the military to fight 3 different continents at the exact same time, we are going to have to invest heavily in our military, but we're also going to have to invest heavily in an industrial base so that we can hit our objectives from a military perspective, not only with our ships, but also with our planes.
So he's saying there, in order to fight 3 different wars at the same time, we got to be ready. We need the military to be bigger. By the way, again, the massive contradiction, as we all know, small government, small government, small government, except the military.
Right.
Make it as big as humanly possible. The largest military ever. The Navy's too small. The Air Force is too small. Everything's too small. We need to make sure. And who's he talking about fighting? Is it like Russia, China, and who else? Like random Middle Eastern countries as well?
Mexico?
Like what?
I don't.
He said fight 3 different continents at the same time. Like what do you who exactly are you talking about? I know one of them has to be China he's talking about because these guys are massive China hawks. But was it like China, Iran, Russia? Like look, they're openly talking about like it's inevitable. Like, yeah, well, we got to be ready for 3 wars at the same time.
Right.
Like, do you realize this is a nuclear age, you fucking idiot?
Well, how are you going to pay for it? That never comes into play in these questions, does it? That's like when Janet Yellen got asked about, can we really afford these multiple wars at the same time? And suddenly it's like, oh, yeah, no problem. But when it's healthcare, it's like, oh, we can't afford that. Can't afford anything good for the people. But 3 wars on 3 continents all at the same time. Of course, no problem. Not an issue. This was during the Hugh Hewitt, how many ships portion of the debate.
Excuse me, you didn't answer the question. How big should the Navy be? How many ships?
Where are the single person on the stage, how many ships and what kind of ships and what time frame for the ships. And it was a good, I don't know, how long did this take in the debate? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? So to be honest, completely checked out kind of on that part of the debate. And especially when Tim Scott was talking, I was extra checked out on this part of the debate. So I missed him just casually floating like, we got to be able to wage war on 3 continents all at the same time.
And the other part of the Israel conversation, which was also focused on war, they seamlessly transitioned into the scourge of anti-Semitism on college campuses. And everybody on stage, except save Vivek a little bit, they all sounded like the hypersensitive social justice warrior with pink hair who's 19 years old on a college campus with a septum ring.
Yeah.
Every single one of them was like, we need to make sure there's a safe space.
Yeah.
Safe space. They were acting like anti-Semitism on college campuses is like the main issue in the country right now.
Right.
Because there was a couple, what they're referring to is, what was it? Which Ivy League college did the letter?
Harvard.
Some Harvard students did the letter, and they said after the October 7th terror attack from Hamas that, like, this is solely Israel's fault because of the occupation, because of apartheid. Now, whether or not you agree with that is a separate conversation, because it's like, I get it. It's not solely Israel's fault. Hamas also does have agency. It's unfair to put it all on Israel. You can put a lot of it on Israel.
Right.
You can put a lot of it.
Yeah.
But they said it solely. But people looked at them, Hamas supporters!
Right.
You're Hamas supporters!
Well,
anti-Semites!
Then they've used that to tar everyone.
Every pro-Palestinian group in the country.
Whether
Students for Justice for Palestine. Even if they want a 2-state solution, it's Hamas supporters.
Including Jewish run and led organizations like Not in My Name and Jewish Voices for Peace. Anybody who wants a ceasefire, who's just out there like, hey, I care that Palestinians are dying in large numbers and look at these horrible images of children being massacred, all anti-Semitic, all, deserving of censure. And DeSantis at one point said he wanted to get the DOJ involved in investigations.
He just signed a bill on this. He bragged about using state power to, I think, withhold funds from universities that have pro-Palestinian groups. Of course, he spins it and says, pro-Hamas groups.
Right.
It's like, really? That's your contention? There's like 19-year-old weirdos on college campus who are like on the brink of joining Hamas, sending them donations or what. Like, shut the fuck. You know it's not true. They know it's not true. It's just, there's like Dave Rubin, Mr. Free speech, free speech, free speech. Then France announced we're banning pro-Palestine protests. He was like, yes!
Yeah.
It's like, you guys are so pathetic, so pathetic. They love identity politics on this issue. Yeah. Any other issue, it's, don't talk about race, don't talk about gender, don't talk about any of that stuff. But when it comes to faith, only in this instance, maybe you could also sprinkle in like Christian identity politics too.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Christian and Jewish identity politics.
And
they're
white
like,
identity
we
politics.
need safe spaces.
Yeah. so true. And it is. And the other thing that drives me crazy about this is you have people with actual power, Republican members of Congress, who are out there advocating openly for genocide.
Yes.
And for that there are no innocent Palestinian civilians. They're all just like the Nazis. And this is subject of no debate or commentary or concern from them, from people who have actual power. And then you also have, of course, the fact that members of the Netanyahu government, cabinet ministers in the Netanyahu government, saying the same things and openly, floating plans for ethnic cleansing. This is no matter of concern. Like the actual literal violence that Palestinians, not the like words are violence, but actual literal violence that Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, by the way, are being subjected to. No, we're not worried about that. We're worried about a march for a ceasefire that 2/3 of the American public, including a majority of Republicans, actually support.
This all goes back to the Rashida Tlaib conversation. She was just censured by Congress, and they said
Unbelievable.
She was censured because she released a video which showed the carnage in Gaza and juxtaposed it with Biden saying, we support Israel and Netanyahu, and basically like, hey, we're going to remember this in 2024. And at the end of the video, some protesters were chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. There's the text on the screen that said, from the river to the sea, and they all turned on her and said, you're calling for the genocide of all Israelis. And she was like, what? And she literally went on to clarify in the next tweet. She's like, just to be clear, when I say from the river to the sea, what I want is a one-state democratic solution, justice for all, voting rights for all, equality for all.
Yep.
She's telling them what she means. It doesn't mean killing anybody, genociding anybody, kicking Jews off the land, or Israel. It doesn't mean any of that. It means justice for all, one-state solution. You could have a debate whether or not it's binational, could be Israel-Palestine or Israel. That's all in the finer points.
Right.
But they go, you want to wipe Israel off the map. And some of them say, like, you want to genocide the Jews. They will say she's trying to genocide the Jews. And they censured her as a result of that. Your point was, you got all these Republican congresspeople and Republican senators who are saying literal genocidal shit.
Yep.
We want to turn Gaza into a parking lot. That's what one of them said the other day. Then you had the Brian Mast, who wore the IDF uniform to Congress, wearing a foreign country's uniform, military uniform, to Congress. And he said, don't be so loose saying they're Palestinian civilians. Would you say they're Nazi civilians? These people are, you have Lindsey Graham, who was asked, is there a number of civilians where you would start to get uncomfortable with this number of Palestinian civilians dying? He goes, no, there isn't. You have the people, no red lines. John Kirby was asked early on in the conflict. He said, there's no red lines for Israel. They asked him again the other day when we surpassed 9,000 innocent civilians dead. He goes, there's still no red lines. All of these people saying all of these things that are literally genocidal. Fucking crickets.
Yeah.
Nobody gets censured.
Yep.
Nobody gets finger wagging at them. Nobody gets a letter written to them saying, how dare you? You've hurt my feelings. But she says from the river to the sea, which she means justice for all when she says that. And they go, nope, you're genocidal. Look, I get it, man. Yes, there's some Hamas people that when they say from the river to the sea, they mean expel the Jews or kill the Jews. Yes, that exists. But you can't pretend like everybody who says that means the exact same thing when Rashida Tlaib told you what she means. And when some college students chant it, they don't mean genocide either. They're out there trying to stop a genocide. Their freaking placards say that. Stop the genocide. And they just get straw man. I hate it so much. And she's the only Palestinian American, in Congress. And she was censured at a time when there are 9,000 innocent Palestinian civilians. Now you say 10,000 innocent Palestinian civilians who are dead as a direct result of the Israeli bombing that we fund. We fund it. We arm it. It's just, it drives me absolutely crazy. It is disgusting. Somebody pointed out the second censure in American history was somebody who proposed a resolution to end slavery, and they got censured. And that's what this reminds me of.
Yep.
100% that's what this reminds me of.
Exactly right. That is exactly right. I mean, she has been the most courageous voice on this issue, calling for basic humanity for Palestinian and Israeli innocent civilians. I mean, without a doubt. And it really is very hard for me to cope with the fact that there is a literal genocide being carried out, plans for complete ethnic cleansing, being released to the public, and you're trying to pretend like a chant at a march is calling for genocide when there is an actual genocide, textbook definition of genocide, as some international human rights lawyers have pointed out, going on. This is, to go back to what we were talking about earlier and the comparison with the Iraq War, the Biden administration and a lot of other politicos, like they think this is kind of a flash in the pan and young people are worried about this and Arab Americans are worried about this, Muslim Americans are worried about this, but they'll get over it. They'll move along. Something else will come along. I really don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't think that you can watch our government supporting and funding this war on innocent Palestinians and see those babies being murdered and kids being pulled out of the rubble and being orphaned. And I don't think you see this and really wrap your head around, like, it's our government that is backing this and helping to fund it and our taxpayer dollars. And you're gaslighting us and you're calling like a Nazi the one of the few people who has the courage to stand against this. I don't think you forget that. I don't think you go back to a time when you didn't have that realization that this is actually a thing that's on the table. So, I also, with regard to the like college campus censorship debate, I mean, this part too reminds me of the war on terror. And remember the way that the security state expansion and all of this warrantless wiretapping and all of this was justified in the name of national security. And we got to find the bad guys and we got to make sure no one's engaging in any wrong thing. I mean, that's how we ended up with this massive expansion of the security state. Nothing has been learned. Nothing has changed. If anything, it's just like ramped up. They don't even pretend to put a face on it the way that we used to. I mean, we didn't hear this just like outright genocidal rhetoric during the Iraq War, at least not nearly as often as this is just commonplace in Israel's war on Gaza. And the last thing I'll say about this, just this irritates me, and the Harvard letter point, which I said, you can't say Israel's solely to blame. Like Hamas has agency. They are, they paraglided into a music festival and murdered people. They deserve some blame for that, right? But you see people like Ben Shapiro making the exact opposite case. I saw New York Times op-ed making the exact opposite case of like, oh, well, every single civilian death
is on Hamas
in Gaza is on Hamas. They bear sole responsibility. It's the literal same argument that the stupid college kids were making at Harvard. You've got Ben Shapiro in the New York Times, et cetera, making that, but, with the roles reversed. And no outcry over that. That logic apparently is perfectly fine.
I remember when people were arguing about the Al-Ali hospital bombing, and the pro-Israeli side was like, it was definitely a misfired Islamic Jihad missile, and people were arguing about it online over and over and over and over and over. Well, did you know? You want to take a guess what the total number of health facilities are that have been attacked?
He was like 60-some.
111 now.
Oh my God.
111, including 42 ambulances, 20 hospitals, and 50 clinics. There are 135 health staff that are now dead because of Israel's bombing. That's nurses, that's doctors. 135. 46 journalists have been murdered in the bombing. So what they do is they'll find one area and try to nitpick you to death. And then, by the way, what happens is the Western media then gets scared of being accused of being pro-Hamas.
Right.
So they sanitize every title about Israel where it's like, a blast in the marketplace killed some Palestinians. A blast. A blast.
Right.
Well, I guess the blast shouldn't have done that. Who made the blast happen? Who fired the bomb? So it's called working the refs. That's what they do. They work the refs. But you know what? Like you said, it's not working on this one because the carnage is too overwhelming. When you have over 4,000 children dead, you could see the videos, you could see the pictures.
And because the media, the corporate legacy media doesn't have a lock on what people are able to see anymore. And so we were talking about the Vivek, Nikki Haley, like TikTok debate or whatever. All of them were like, oh, this algorithm on TikTok is serving all of this pro-Hamas content and like brainwashing our youth, et cetera, et cetera. They're so upset that young people are actually able to see the carnage unfolding and reacting to that. That they already wanted to ban TikTok, but they're using that as further justification. It's like, maybe it's not TikTok that's the problem here. Maybe it's the mass killing, indiscriminate killing of innocent civilians that could be the problem here. Just spitballing. Maybe that's the actual issue. And I don't know if you remember, Kyle, there was the guy who's the head of the ADL. He was on MSNBC early on. He went
I
on
do
this
remember
whole
this,
rant
yeah.
about, directed at Ali Velshi and Ayman and Mehdi, and saying like they're using Hamas talking points and who's writing the scripts. Is it Hamas? And he said this thing that stuck with me the whole time. He was like, you're showing all of these pictures of the rubble. Get the story right. Get the story right. He was outraged that they were even showing images out of Gaza of the destruction that was unfolding. And that's what this comes back to, is like they just want to completely invisibilize that. They want to completely erase it, sanitize it, pretend like, well, these aren't even really people anyway, at least not people we should care about. They're not innocent. And, we're going to do everything we can to only highlight the Israeli civilian suffering and exaggerate that also in many instances, not that it wasn't already horrifying enough to start with, and completely erase these people so that you can't even see or empathize with what they're going through. And, that's the reason that Israel imposes these communications and internet blackouts as well. That's the reason they've been massacring journalists on the ground. There's actually very few journalists even left in Gaza at this point, because not only they, but their family members have been targeted as well. It's all to try to prevent people from having any idea of the extent of the horror and the suffering, but they can't keep a lid on it because it's just too great what they have done there.
And everybody on that stage supports all of it.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.